Hey, what?
You're a robot?
So, what's missing from this picture? Well, you saw the title of the video, so you can probably guess. It's Zane's power source. It is interesting to think that this integral piece of Zane's design wasn't there from the beginning. But the glowing hunk of magic inside Zane's chest is nowhere to be found in the originally planned 2-season run of the show. It's only once we get to season 3 rebooted that we get this.
What powers you?
I don't know.
The nature of Zane's power source is unknown, even to himself. And soon after we learn about it, it is split in half and then destroyed? So what was up with this thing? Was it actually destroyed? What did it do? Where did it come from? And will the lore completely fall apart the more we try and analyze it? Spoiler alert. Yeah. First thing to know about the power source, or power core, is that it is an infinite energy source. To a degree. Now, even though we don't see it through the first 2 seasons, we can assume that it's there. Chalk it up to upgrades that Zane has had over the years, but when we first see it in season 3, it's supposed to be a long-standing feature of Zane's anatomy. This thing has powered Zane his whole life up to this point, with no help. The first real look we get at it is in season 3, episode 2, The Art of the Silent Fist, when Pixel is repairing Zane. Pixel remarks that his power source looks to be a unique piece, not matching with the rest of his design.
This piece, it's unique.
It's not something that you would expect his creator, Dr. Julian, to have access to. You'll notice this light blue glow coming off the piece, which might lead you to theorize that it has a connection to another glowing blue aspect of Zane, his elemental power. Now, this is by far the best theory we have about Zane's power source. And later details do give credence to this idea, but the show has yet to outright confirm it, so there's no way to be sure. Now, hold on to all of that, because things are about to get even more complicated. Pixel reaches forward to touch Zane's power source. It hurts him, she receives a mild shock, and I think there might be some brief consequences to her interaction with it. Pixel, at this point, does not have emotion, but Pixel does seem to gain some sense of agency here. You can hear some nuance in her voice when she says that she was curious that we haven't heard from her before.
I was curious to understand why you are so different.
And throughout the rest of the episode, she makes big moves to help her own personal interests. Now, there are 2 things that could be contributing to this change. First is the Technoblade, which freed her from the Overlord's corrupt programming. But second is her interaction with Zane's power core. Now, this isn't hard proof that the power source has affected her, but it's something to keep in mind for later. Skip forward an episode, and Zane is now cutting his power core in half so that Pixel can have her own self-sustaining source of power. How this works, I don't know. Generally speaking, you can't cut a battery in half and have it still work. Not even Zane knows what he's getting into with this operation, but he does it anyway. Important to note, this now means we have 2 halves of this thing floating around the world to keep track of, so keep that in mind. The operation seems to work. Pixel gets online and Zane stays online. This gets framed as a romantic gesture. Zane has split his heart in half for the girl he likes, and Pixel now seems to reciprocate his feelings. Now, this doesn't mark the flip in Pixel's feelings on Zane. At the end of the previous episode, she, at the very least, saw him as a friend worthy of self-sacrifice for. And again, that change could have happened because of the Technoblade, her interaction with Zane's core, or even just her own personal feelings progressing over the course of the episode. Which of these is true? We have no way of knowing, but either way, the heart transplant seems to solidify her feelings towards him. This adds some more weight to the idea that androids change behavior when they interact with the power core, but again, it's not solid evidence of anything. Now, turns out there are some drawbacks to cutting the core in half. Zane can no longer do spinjitzu, but Pixel has an increased fighting ability. Now, this is weird, right? It does suggest that Zane's fighting ability is directly linked to the power core, but that could just be because of the level of power available to him, maybe? Zane still has an infinite power source, but the amount of power available to him at any given moment is now less than what he's used to. This interpretation also implies that Pixel now has access to more energy than she did on the typical Ninjago power grid. Pixel and Zane can also do spinjitzu if they do it together. So I'm not too sure what that's about. I guess maybe if the two halves of the heart are close enough, maybe like you can do power sharing, or maybe Zane's heart is just literally his ability to do spinjitzu. His spinjitzu is the same sort of light blue glowy color. We then learn that Zane's power source allows people to enter the Digiverse.
But that was before I truly understood the entire capabilities of what Zane's powers truly allow us.
Keep in mind, at this point also, we're only using half of Zane's power source. Okay, maybe this isn't as crazy as it sounds. I think this is just referring to the fact that at this point in the story, Zane's power source is the only clean source of power, not corrupted by the Overlord. So this could just mean, oh, Zane, you have power. And so that's allowing us to do things that we need power to do. So that's less crazy. But I don't know, maybe Zane's power source just, like, is the metaverse? Several pointless shenanigans later, the ninja build a rocket and they use Zane's core to power it. We then get this line.
It appears my unlimited energy is in fact limited.
Which again, I assume means that his power source wouldn't stop creating power, but just isn't creating power fast enough for their needs. And then we get the go-to sad scene of the whole show. Zane puts himself on the line to save his friends, and his half of the heart overloads due to an influx of golden power, which is a whole other question mark that we're not going to be thinking about too hard in this video. This creates an explosion, which is powerful enough to destroy the essence of all evil. So Zane's heart is a bomb. A bomb capable of creating infinite clean energy. Zane's heart is a nuclear bomb. Honestly, it'd be hilarious if season 4 just turned into the Chernobyl miniseries. But no, obviously, to destroy something like the Overlord, you would have to have some sort of energy related to the first Spinjitzu master in some way. Like, say, elemental energy. But most importantly to remember, this is where Zane's half of the heart gets destroyed. It explodes into a bajillion itty-bitty pieces all over the city. We're not getting that back. This will complicate things going forward. At Zane's funeral, Kai says that he thinks Zane was powered by Brotherhood.
But I'd like to think it was Brotherhood.
Which I'm 99% sure is a metaphor, but who knows? Throw it on the theory pile. On an unrelated note, it begins to snow. So like, Zane's core is definitely his elemental power, right? Now, that's the end of season 3, and that's also the most information that we're going to get about this piece of tech for ever. Everything else comes in very brief snippets. The next of which is in season 4. Zane is rebuilt, and Pixel is scrapped. Again, this makes things complicated as far as the status of the core. We know Zane doesn't have his anymore, and we know Pixel isn't using hers, but we also don't know what became of hers. We have a couple of options. One option is that it is just sitting in her dismantled body on Chen's island, never to be picked up by anyone. The second option comes from a popular fan theory that the reason Pixel was scrapped to begin with was to help repair Zane. So it's possible her half of the core was given back to Zane. However, if we are running on the assumption that Zane's power core is also his elemental power, this season introduces some kinks into that theory, namely that his powers are stolen from him by this evil staff thing, and also that elemental powers are revealed to be genetic. The most obvious question being, how did Zane get an elemental power when Zane doesn't have genetics? Well, fast forward to season 8, we get to see a flashback where we learn that the previous Master of Ice visited Zane and his father when they lived alone in the woods. After which, Zane seemed to be acting differently.
Ever since he left, Zane's been acting stranger than usual.
Sounds like the previous Master of Ice gave his powers to Zane manually, and it had a similar effect as the core does on technology that it interacts with. Crazy, huh? This would also conveniently explain where Dr. Julian got a piece that doesn't look like it comes from his workshop. So yeah, everything points to Zane's power source being his elemental power. But if that's the case, how do you explain this? Look at this. Zane is moving around, perfectly functional, and his powers are gone. So what's powering him here then? Well, our good friend Tommy says it's just tech, I guess? So you're telling me our options are, at some point in between dying and resurrecting himself, Zane figured out how to make infinite clean energy and implemented it into his design last minute, or he does require a charge at some points, and the people of Chen's Island just are so kind enough as to keep him plugged in occasionally? I don't find either of these particularly plausible. So I'm gonna go with option number 3, Ninjago's power grid. From what I can tell, Ninjago has figured out how to transmit power in a similar way to like radio waves. The power comes from this central location, and most, if not all, electronics get their power from the energy that it sends out into the air. And when the power plant shuts down, so does all technology that relies on the power from its waves. It's a weird system, but it's plot convenient, and we know it's the power source that Pixel was utilizing. My guess is that Zane, when rebuilding himself, incorporated Borg's energy wave system of operating into his design. We know he was working with what he had access to and had to make changes to his design. I mean, he's all silver now. So this seems like the most likely option to me. So when Zane gets back his powers towards the end of season 4, if you're running under the assumption that his power source is his elemental power, we can assume that Zane has at least half of his power source back again. And if you're not running under that theory, that means that he either doesn't have any of his original power source, or he got Pixel's half of the power source. We're going to once again jump forward to season 8, where it's revealed that Pixel has built a new body for herself, which logically shouldn't have any halves of any hearts and is just running off of the Ninjago power grid. We do have this line though.
Zane, may I ask you something?
You have half my heart.
So this doesn't make any sense, because whatever way you slice it, there's only one half of the heart left. And if we're assuming that the core is elemental power, then Zane has to have it. If you're not, I guess maybe you could claim that Pixel's half of the power source stayed in her dismantled body, and she's using parts of her dismantled body to make her new body. Why Zane didn't try and utilize the infinite power source just lying around, I don't know, but I guess technically that is possible. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's just poetic. It's not literal. But no, if this was poetic, why would you say it like that?
You have half my heart.
The obvious line is, I gave you half my heart. 'Cause like, that's the situation. That's what happened. Also, you have half my heart is not a good metaphor. Like, the phrase is, you have my whole heart. Right? Half your heart implies that the other half belongs to something or someone else. It's not very romantic. This sentence is only a thing if it's literal. And if it's literal, then the elemental power theory has fallen apart. Or I guess it's just a lie?
You have half my heart.
Technically, we do have another option. Time travel. Yes, season 7 gave us time travel. So technically speaking, anything after that point can be different with no explanation. Now, all these theories hold up fine until we go one season further to Hunted, where Zane is thrown into a different realm. Meaning, there's no way he's getting power from the Ninjago power grid. So either all of the theories involving Zane not having a piece of his power core at this point in the timeline are thrown out the window, or you believe Tommy's "they invented an infinite source of clean energy off screen and forgot to mention it" claim, which I refuse to engage with. He has to have at least part of his original power source at this point in the timeline. In fact, we get to see what looks like Zane's power source at later points in the series, and it looks incredibly similar to his original power source. It would honestly be weird if it wasn't. So not only do I believe that Zane still has his original power source, I think it's his elemental power. And as a final piece of evidence to support this claim, I give you the mechanic. The mechanic takes a particular interest in Zane several times, but most notably in season 12, when he hooks Zane up to help power an interdimensional portal. Now, why wouldn't he just use normal energy to power this gateway? The only reason to use Zane is if his power is special, and the easiest way for his power to be special is if it's elemental power. So before I run through my final theory, I'm just gonna lay all the options out on the table. With what we have discovered, Zane's power source could be just tech, I guess, elemental power, the essence of sentience, Zane's ability to do spinjitzu, the metaverse, a nuclear bomb, brotherhood, inside Zane Pixel both or neither, a time travel glitch, or Chi. Chima's canon to Ninjago. Chi glows light blue. It's possible. So with all that information, here's my best theory. Zane's power source is, in fact, his elemental power. More specifically, it is a piece of metal which has been imbued with elemental power. Code which interacts with concentrated elemental power like that for extended periods is altered in a way which increases independence, feeling, and autonomy. It's basically a shortcut for making artificial sentience of the highest levels. This is why Zane's personality changes after the Ice Master visits him. This is why Pixel displayed increased emotion after touching Zane's core, and this is why she becomes most autonomous after getting the heart transplant. This means that their code is changed so that they're different going forward, even if the core is taken out of their systems. Now, Zane, after being rebuilt, does not have his half of the heart, and so changed his designs so that he's able to function off of the Ninjago power grid. After being dispersed in the explosion, Zane's half of the elemental energy eventually finds its way back to the rest of the energy inside Pixel's half of the core, meaning all of the elemental power is now condensed in half of the metal. This explains not only why Pixel was scrapped, but why she was brought back in the first place. Ronin is going to kidnap Zane for his elemental power. He scans for elemental power, and it's in the wrong droid, so he takes both of them to cover all his bases. The fact that the elemental power isn't where they expect it to be freaks the bad guys out, and so after draining the elemental power, they dismantle Pixel to try and figure out what's going on, and they can't. All they find is a semicircular piece of metal which doesn't seem to hold any purpose. Pixel gets put into Zane's head, and when the elemental power is released later in the season, the ice power goes back to Zane, its original holder, and the current location of its most recent holder, so whatever way you slice it, the obvious choice. There's a similarly circular shaped piece of placeholder metal in Zane's new design that all the power can go into when it comes back to Zane, meaning the fact that Zane's new power source looks similar but not exactly the same as his old power source actually makes sense. After season 4, the ninja go back to Chen's island and reclaim a bunch of relics that were left there, including Pixel's body, which goes into storage somewhere. When Pixel decides to rebuild herself in season 7, she uses some of these pieces, including her half of Zane's heart, which is now just a useless piece of metal, but she keeps it in her design for sentimental reasons. We know that this body is capable of functioning on the Ninjago power grid, so that's how she's been operating since then. We don't ever see Pixel leave Ninjago as a realm, so it's possible for her to be using that power the whole time. And this is why we don't see her in Dragon's Rising. Ninjago's power grid was destroyed in the merge, meaning that Pixel does not have access to power until someone finds her and gets it to her. And in an ideal world, in order to wake her up, Zane will have to find her and once again split his heart for her. Do I think that this theory is correct in terms of canon? No, absolutely not. But do I believe that it's just about the only theory that can explain away this train wreck worth of information that we've been gifted? 1,000% yes. There's no other explanation that... Screw you, Tommy.